After an 8-week campaign hard fought on the biggest issues affecting the United Kingdom and, of course, the world, energy, Russia and the cost of living, Foreign Minister Ms Truss was announced last night as the next British Prime Minister. Truss becomes the UK's third female British PM after the glass ceiling was, of course, smashed by Margaret Thatcher in 1979. All Conservative, I might add, with British Labor yet to even have a female leader, let alone Prime Minister. To get there, it's been a hard and long slog on the hustings and an often intense campaign, with critics concerned that weeks of blue-on-blue attacks between Truss and Sunak as they jostled for the votes of party members would diminish the chances that the ultimate leader being able to unite the parliamentary team and move on. For an update, as the new party Tory leader now heads for her meeting with the Queen to form a government in her name and officially assume the Prime Ministership, let's cross to London for all the latest, and who better to join us than GB News host and Daily Mail columnist, one of my favourite commentators, I know one of yours, Dan Wootton. Well, it's been a messy few months for the Tory party. They've now got a new leader with a pretty unorthodox past, I've got to say. She barely survived the early parliamentary votes, but she's really shown her popularity with the Tory base by the win last night. Can she now unite her parliamentary colleagues, and can she unite the country?
Well, look, it's going to be tough. And, Peter, I say this as a fan of Ms Truss. I don't think the country ever needed this leadership contest. Far from it. This was a massive own goal by the Conservative Party, who decided to depose Boris Johnson, who had delivered Brexit, who had won a landslide election win, the biggest, by the way, since Margaret Thatcher. So putting that to one side, Truss was the woman who this country needed. The alternative, Rishi Sunak, was a nightmare in the eyes of anyone other than Tory MPs. He's a globalist, he is a billionaire, he's a member of the establishment, he was totally in lockstep with the health authorities who locked this country down for months and months and months. So Sunak was not an option as Prime Minister, but Truss has a really difficult path. What you've got to understand is that the entire political establishment are against her. The civil service blob who tried to overturn the Brexit vote in the first place are against her. Virtually the entire mainstream British media is against her, certainly the BBC or the British bashing corporation, as I call them these days. So look, she has the biggest challenge facing any Prime Minister since Margaret Thatcher in the late 70s. And that's why, really, Peter, the only way I think Truss can survive is if she channels her inner Margaret Thatcher. She has to become the Iron Lady Mark II if she wants to have any hope.
All right, we'll get into some of those issues she's facing at the moment. I mean, she's got a shocking in-tray on day one, but what does a Truss cabinet look like? With plenty of talent we saw in the race. I mean, I was a real fan of Kemi Badenoch. She really took on that culture fight. Will Badenoch and others get a role? And how does she deal with now backbencher Boris?
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting. No Boris in the cabinet. He doesn't want to be there because he needs to go off and make millions and millions and millions of pounds, release his books, start his newspaper columns again, travel all over the world before potentially making another bid to be Prime Minister. Because what you've got to realise, Peter, is he sees himself and he sees his career like his hero, Winston Churchill. And for those who know British history, of course, Churchill was booted out by the British public after World War II. Some people compare that to Boris losing his job after the COVID pandemic. But then he returned as Prime Minister when the British public realised the error of their ways. Of course, when it comes to Boris, he was actually never voted out by the British public. So no Boris in the cabinet. We absolutely will see Kemi Badenoch. You're right. She's a future star of the Tory party. She should lead the war on woke. Folk are hoping that maybe she'll end up as Education Secretary, as Culture Secretary. It's really interesting because I hate talking about identity politics, right? But you mentioned in the intro that Truss will be the third female Prime Minister. You're completely right. Labour, the Labour Party in the UK, has never even had a female leader.
All right, well, one of the big issues, of course, is energy. I was shocked at how much it dominated the news cycle, how dire things are for households and small business in the UK. Quarterly bills unaffordable, businesses closing. This was a Boris Johnson Achilles heel, all that carry on about net zero. I think it all goes back to David Cameron, if I'm honest. How does she deal with this issue?
Well, look, she's got to shake things up. We have been on a deranged march to net zero. Senior Conservative politicians, Peter, used to sit down with Greta Thunberg and treat her as some sort of oracle. They took mad groups like the Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil, who, glue themselves to the middle of major motorways. They took folk like that seriously. And finally, this energy crisis, the war in Ukraine, the fact that we don't have the access in Europe to the Russian gas and electricity has woken this country up to the appalling and shameful state that we have been left into. And it dates right back, by the way, to the Labour governments, to Gordon Brown and Tony Blair. And actually, Nick Clegg, the bloke who now runs Facebook, well, it's really awkward for him because a clip went viral the other day when he was Deputy Prime Minister of Nick Clegg boasting about the fact, we're not going to do any new nuclear power stations because we wouldn't have access to the electricity until 2022. Well, guess what? It's 2022. We're up Schitt's Creek without a paddle when it comes to electricity. But the critical thing is, how do we become energy independent in the medium term and the long term? And unfortunately, the green extremists, they will now lose this argument. You just have to look at Germany, where even the Green Party of Germany now concede that we do need fossil fuels at the moment. We have to frack in this country. We have to extract gas from the North Sea. We have to build new nuclear power plants. And I think it is one of the areas where we have been so let down by the elite and the establishment. They have left us in this position. They have relied on foreign electricity sources, and Truss will sort it out, but it's going to take a long time. This doesn't happen overnight.
And you've got an election in 2 years. And of course, I'm urging Australians to watch what's happening in the UK, because we have a chance now ahead of 2032 to rewrite the ship, learning from your errors, but only if we take heed and again, put the creed of green religion to one side and look at energy security. I've got to ask you before I go, though, not much can compete with a headline about a change of Prime Minister, but of course the return of the Duke and Duchess in the UK certainly has. They've arrived back in the country. We call them the ginger and the whinger here on Credlin. What's been the mood? A very abrasive interview by the Duchess last week. How do the British public feel about her, given the Queen's health and their removal of themselves from the royal family?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. The mood is, please go away. Please leave us alone. We are disgusted with the way they have treated Prince William and Kate. We are horrified by the way they've treated their father, Prince Charles. Not a perfect guy, by the way, but remember, he did fund their original trip to California and paid for them for years and years and years. But I think the thing that has stunned us most is that as the Queen battles perhaps the most serious health crisis of her life, she's not even able to leave Scotland, Balmoral in Scotland, in order to travel to Buckingham Palace to be there for the handover of the new Prime Minister. And what do Harry and Meghan do? Throw more mud, throw more dirt, slag off the royal family. Well, they're back in the country this week to further their own brand. Guess what? They haven't seen William and Harry. They haven't seen Prince Charles. They haven't seen the Queen. It's all about them. It's all about the moolah, the big bucks, the Netflix deal. And the UK, we're fed up. We don't want them here.
Well, we're not big fans of them here in Australia either. Dan Wootton, you are brilliant. Thank you for joining me tonight on Credlin.